Well, hey, we're here, and I have not done one of these in a while, and I think it's gonna be really cool. Let me just see if, yeah, I can definitely lock the screen. This is really cool. So, I want to talk about something. I was looking at my chart, and I want to talk about something that I discovered in my chart here on Spotify. It's really interesting because I've noticed that you guys have been coming back and joining me here, and I really appreciate it. So let's get into this because it's a deep episode. We haven't done an insightful deep episode in a while. I've been really just wanting to create and see what you guys really relate to. And based on our interactions together and engagement, based on just spending time with you guys, I'm understanding at a deep level that you guys relate. But it's been hard for you guys to really somehow connect in a sort of way where you're not afraid to relate, or where you're not afraid of where you're at in life, really, because none of this is really about me. It's about what you relate to. Like, you're not here because you might have known me, you might have never known me. You know, and as a creator, this is what we do. We take chances like this to create on the premise that anybody could find us, anybody could listen. But the problem that I'm recognizing that I've had myself as somebody who has been on the other side watching and listening desperately to others is this: wait a minute, why do I like what they're saying? Why do I like what they're creating? And why do I actually feel a sense of, I'm not alone in this, I can relate to this, a sense of curiosity, bringing up topics where they're at in spaces where they go so that maybe I can get them to put their thoughts out, and other people that are like-minded to put their thoughts out, because this is all of us doing this as a collective. This is not just me. And you're like, I want to know what people's thoughts are on topics A, C, and E, and then B, D, and F, I'm kind of blah. I don't know. I'll have to see. And then sometimes B, D, and F just sort of come out and slip out randomly, right? So really interesting. WhatsApp has been really cool. Facebook has been really cool. TikTok has been pretty cool. And here on the podcast, I've just been really able to connect with you guys through my chart. And something that stood out to me, honestly, and I've kind of gotten tired of engaging with it, but it stood out to me because I think it's something that I've needed to expose a little bit, is this narcissism topic has stood out on my chart. And I think when you're healing from relationships, when you're healing from really toxic patterns in yourself, I'm not talking about other people, relax. I'm not talking directly about anybody. But when you're healing from these toxic patterns and bad habits and this bullshit thing that you find yourself engaged in or whatever, what I find can, make us really empowering and make us feel really, really connected is that person, that family, that old friend, that it can even go as low as your pet that was mean or something, was a narcissism, was into narcissism, is a narcissist, right? And I think there's a time and a place for that where you can understand that, like, you're not going to get somebody and, like, drag them into the car and get them to go to therapy just so you can diagnose them as a narcissist, right? That's not going to happen. This is based on the interactions that you've had with other people, the toxic behaviors that you didn't like, the things that people said or did that you just didn't connect with. And instead of maybe saying, it's just not my life choice, I just don't connect with it. And I've been so guilty of this. We tend to go, well, they're just a narcissist and all of this kind of stuff. And I think when people have been really out to hurt you and like they've been really out to hurt you, and I mean, I'm not talking like just, there's a couple different levels of this where people tend to go all out of their way, whether it's being stagnant in a situation that they could have helped in, or whether it's being way too involved in a situation that they don't need to help in. It's not necessarily because there's this big, sticky, giant label you get to put on everybody. And I mean, unfortunately, this is what makes life easier for us. Like, it makes the work less challenging and more easy to do when we do this. And I've been so guilty of doing this in the past. But what I've had to realize and recognize is, like, only 50% of what they're saying is true. And that 50% actually matters a lot when you're assessing what is going to work for me, what is healthy for me, and what is less toxic. What do I relate to? What do I not relate? It's really about relating. It's not so much like in family, for instance. If people in family have a lot of medications they're on or that they're taking, right? You don't get to sit there and say, that's narcissistic abuse. That's something that they're doing because they're a narcissist, right? The 50% of these empowering messages, oh, well, they're wrong and they're a narcissist and you need to get away from that. That is only because of the projected behavior that they've learned from the previous generations. That has nothing to do with their lifestyle choices. And so when it comes to their lifestyle choices, what we got to recognize is that it's just not something you may relate to. But that doesn't mean that automatically makes them, a narcissist, or that automatically makes them these people that are completely in a state of being, like, to the point where they have to be dragged to a therapist whether they like it or not. That doesn't mean that they need to be diagnosed with this label. What it means, actually, what it comes down to is that what they actually need is to be understood in a way that is not, you're not stuck with this resentment towards them. So what it looks like is that actually you just don't relate to that lifestyle choice. You just don't want to be on medications for everything. When you take care of your doctors, you go to your doctors and handle them differently than they might. And then the other 50% about narcissism that I showed on my chart on the podcast is that, my podcast chart shows that I clearly have narcissistic tendencies, and that what it comes down to is that the 50% of this behavior that we see is only pointed out about being narcissistic because what we notice is that it has more to do with how you're feeling when you're being treated like shit. And when you're being treated like shit and you don't like that you're being treated like shit, it's easy to label narcissism on it. But it doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean that being treated like shit is acceptable or okay or tolerated. And so when you have had like a ton of family or friends in your life, like maybe all your life, because you've not known how to make like really good decisions on relationships, maybe you've made one really good decision on relationships and the rest of them have been just shitty decisions. What you end up finding is that in this scenario, it's more about how you feel and those feelings almost being like done away with or told that you're wrong or you're being invalidated. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have narcissistic personality disorder officially. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stay in a relationship with them or connect with people that are treating you like shit at the same time. It just means that people have their own way of doing things and you may not relate. Also, another thing that stood out on my chart in the podcast that I like, because I'm very nerdy, I really do like reading charts. And I don't like reading charts in the way of how many listeners did I get, but I like reading charts of like, what are you relating to? And another thing that I have been digging into insight-wise is this premise that when you move on from people, it's going to be this beautiful closure and people are going to just be extremely generous with being nice all the time, or that they're going to be really happy that you've moved on. They're going to be extremely happy that you've got a better life for yourself. They're going to be like over the top excited for you, that they're going to just become a better person because they've seen that you've grown. And then they're going to like this move when you move on from family or friends, that it's going to be this beautiful, we've all found our own paradise that works for us. And we're just, it's safe to expect that the people from our past is going to, number one, even be happy that you've moved on in the first place and that you're gone. And number two, it's going to be safe somehow to trust that that's what they wanted for you all along. That's not true. And usually when people come back into your life, it's because, after you've done really well and got out of a really bad situation, it's because they want something. Now, again, it goes back to, does that make them a narcissist? No, it just means that it's something you don't like. It just means that it's something you don't relate to. It just means that it's something that you may not connect with. And so I just wanted to point this out on this episode because I've noticed it stood out in my chart of what you guys relate to. And I guess that means that I might have went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, a little over 50% of my sort of content consumption. I've talked about the sort of bad ideas about going down rabbit holes a little too much. And so I'm admitting now that I haven't necessarily been talking with you guys about it, but just seeing it in my chart is alarming because I don't want us to get stuck on, they would have been a much nicer family member. They would have been a much better parent to me if they weren't narcissistic, if they didn't have narcissistic traits, if they weren't abuse themselves. It's like, okay, that's only 50% true. The other 50% is that it is their choice to be that way, and it is their choice to be sad and mean and jealous of their own children's success. It is their ultimate choice, and it is their choice to intentionally do things to hurt you and keep you stuck and make your situation worse because they feel so entitled that they're your parent, and they just feel like really pissed when you have any sort of validation that you've helped them in any way as they are your parent, if you've helped take care of them in any way, if you've helped pay their bills in any way, they can't stand that, because then that would make you have some kind of skills that would cause you to have some kind of impact on your family and on your own life and autonomy on your own. And they don't want that for you. They want to always be the one to take care of you. They want to always be the ones to do everything for you. But, some people want that, and they want that to be their win in life, because they don't know any better and they think that they're winning by having a better off family. And so, again, not something that I relate to at all, but that doesn't make people narcissistic. And I've seen people have very, very good lives that thrive in that environment and survive and work really well and have really, really healthy relationships. So just wanted to point that out as a literal tech insight, a literal data insight, really, because it's not tech related necessarily. A really good analytical insight on this episode. Thank you so much for being here. I'm enjoying doing these more and more. I feel like I'm creating different content now, a variety of content in multifacets of the different stories, the different characters on this podcast. I feel like there's different parts to all of us that we can embrace and create. And I certainly want you to know that you can embrace parts of yourself and move on without having to necessarily shit on the 50% of things you don't relate to and the 50% of things that cause toxicity. So I hope that makes sense for you. Thank you so much for listening. Take care of yourself, take care of your life, take care of each other, and let's stay focused.